Everybody, let me to have this opportunity to present to you. First of all, my name is Getschman. I am the CEO and founder of Common Sense for Uniting America. And I'm also a native Nevadan. I was born in Henderson, raised in Carson City, and I went off to the University of Washington and spent the next 28 years in the Navy as a naval officer, both as an aviator and a foreign area officer, living in Japan and throughout Europe. For today, the topic is I wanted to let you know about this mystery that I've been working on for like about the last 10 years and solicit your help on it as we go through it. The mystery is basically this: why are we politically divided? Now, there's a lot of books out about it, and there's a lot of thinking that's been done about it, but I kind of have my own little take on it, and that I'm going to present to you. But before we get into that, I think it's important to understand why this is such a big deal. It should not be lost on anybody, especially in the advanced Alpha Sigma, or Pi Sigma Alpha, that our polarization in the government is causing all kinds of problems. The two parties don't trust each other. They have difficult times working together. And if we're trying to deal with COVID or climate change or the economy or healthcare, immigration, it makes it very challenging for us to do that sort of thing. Plus, it is spread throughout the entire population where people don't just trust other people because they're in different political parties. And if you're like me, you have members of your family who don't talk to other members of your family because of political differences. So it's kind of the dark reality that we have. Another thing, though, from my military experience that I can tell you, it's very difficult to work with our allies and partners. In Russia, they can plan 20 years down the road. In China, they can plan 50 years down the road. They know what they're going to do. They have a stable system, but we really couldn't make promises beyond a couple of years because a new administration was going to be coming in, and we weren't sure how that was going to work. The other thing I can say from my military background, and right now I'm an intelligence planner, and this is kind of the things that we do, is how easy it is for one of our adversaries to work their way into the cracks of our population and just start pulling those things apart. They will send out a troll on both the conservative side and the Democratic side, and they'll just yell back and forth at each other and wait for the Americans to hop on. And we do. And that's just kind of part of the trouble with that we're in. And I would offer to you that political division is the ultimate existential threat for democracy, because you really lose a democracy when the people don't trust each other and the people don't trust the government. And that is what the adversary is working very hard to do. So the first thing, though, I'd like to talk about is our division, because if you think about it, our division is a little bit weird and it doesn't make sense. First, we're divided pretty much in half, 50-50. If you look at the 56 elections we've had, 28 have been won by a conservative candidate, and presidential elections, 28 have been won by a liberal candidate. If you look at the popular vote for president, it comes out to 51.2% for the winning candidate. So, I mean, we are right down the middle. And it's been that way for 240 years. So the people have changed, the parties have changed, the events have changed, the media has changed, the technology has changed, but this division, only two parties, not three, not four, only two parties divided evenly in half, has continued to persist. And one of the lenses that we in the military learn to look at life through is one of systems-based, a systems-based perspective. And when you see something like this that doesn't make sense, you start to think there's a systemic reason why this is happening. You don't see straight lines out in nature. It's one of those kind of things. So I wanted to start researching this because I understand the importance of it, and I wanted to get to the bottom of why this is happening. And of course, I did what you did, what you would do, and I started doing some research, and I came across Divergey's law. And I'm sure you're probably familiar with Divergey's law. If you're not, Basically, it says that plurality election rules bring about and maintain two-party competition in a nutshell. Okay, well, we have plurality elections, one person, one vote, and we do have this two-party system. So maybe there's something going on there. So does Divergey tell us why this is happening? And Divergey goes on to say that the law is driven by the idea that in the long run, rational politicians and voters will realize that it is hopeless to have more than two parties competing at the national level. Although three parties may remain in contention for a few years, a party which begins to slide will rapidly disappear as everybody comes to realize that it will win no seats at all if its support is evenly dispersed. Okay, I find that very unsatisfying. It doesn't tell us why why not three parties but two, instead of not two parties but one. Why not four parties, that instead of five? Why is it 50-50? Why has no party been able to dominate the other one over the course of 240 years? Why have we not seen that? So what I did is I started taking a look at elections themselves. And I've got my little fridge magnet election board, visual aid here. And the way we do elections, obviously in the United States, is we have our candidates A, B, and C. And we go to each voter and we ask them a very specific question. It's like, well, which candidate do you want to have represent you? And so you'll have, oh, yes, I want A and I want B. I'll take C. Yeah, we're going to have A. We're going to do B. Yeah, we're all about C over here. And we're all about A. So what did we just do? We just divided ourselves. And what is our problem? We're politically divided. And we've been doing this for 240 years. So is it as simple that we're divided because we're dividing ourselves? Is that what the problem is? Well, maybe, maybe not. It could be that we're dividing ourselves, or it could be that we're already divided, and that our elections just bring that out and show it to us. So we need to take a little bit closer look at us first. So if we take any kind of issue like legalizing marijuana, you will have some people who say, no, never, we should never do that. And then you'll have people who say, yes, we should always do that. It should always be legal. And that creates this political spectrum. And along the way, you're going to have other positions like, well, only big pharma should be allowed to do it. No, but it's got to be licensed. Well, you can only obtain it if you're over 20 or over the counter. Well, you have to do it with a prescription. No, it needs to be over the counter when you're 21. It's like, no, it needs to be over the counter, but you just have to pay taxes on it. Well, you should be able to grow your own and then, sell off whatever you don't have left. And well, you just registered and that's all. And although research tells us that you have these individuals at the political extremes, the majority of individuals are going to be somewhere between these two extremes. As we go across. Now, I'm just moving a bunch of fridge magnets around, and I can put them wherever I want. But if you want to see actual public opinion curves, you can go to Pew Research, and in the search function on that page, you can put in political polarization 2017, and it'll show you a series of public opinion curves. And they always have the same appearance of a hill. So what this is showing us is that we're not starting off in a divided state. We're starting off as the spectrum. Now, this hill, the location of where the majority of the voter opinion is at, will shift to the left and to the right, and it will depend on time, and it will depend on the voters and what we're talking about. But it's not divided into two different sections. If we were to try to identify the best way to represent this mass of voters, My argument would be wherever that majority opinion, that center mass would be the best way, would be the political position best served to report that. Give me a second. But the one thing you should know about the majority opinion, it's not the political center. The political center is halfway between the political left and the political right. That's the political center. So the majority opinion shifts and moves based on what the attitude of the voters are, what the attitude of the voters are sometimes. The problem with the majority opinion is we don't know what it is. We could find out, like right now on this call, there is a majority opinion about whether or not we should legalize marijuana, to what degree it should be legalized. But I don't know what that is. Now, I can find out by listening to each and every one of you. And if I did that, or if, let's say there were 100 people on this call or 10,000 people or something, by doing a random statistical sampling, and I could come up with what I believe the majority opinion is. But that doesn't really do you any good, because I can't tell it to you, because how do you know I'm telling the truth? I could be telling you just what I want you to hear. But there is something we can do without having to trust somebody else dealing with the majority opinion. And that is, we could identify which candidate lies closest to the majority opinion. And the way we would do something like that is we have to measure the political distance between candidate A, candidate B, candidate C, and each voter. The way we can go about doing that is we could have each voter prescribe a rating or a value to each of the candidates to say how close that candidate is to their position. Sort of like giving the highest rating to the candidate that's closest, the worst rating to the candidate that's furthest away, and then whatever the other candidates are in relation to those two. Sort of like doing Amazon ratings. And then the highest rated candidate mathematically is going to be the candidate who's closest to the majority opinion. But how does that help us? So we know what that is, but that's not how you win an election. When we have a minimum voting method, which is what we use, and by minimum voting method, I mean it asks you the question of which candidate do you want to have represent you? Okay, you need two things to actually win the election. The strategy for the candidate involves having two factors. One of it is depth. And by depth, I mean having a large mass of voters who believe in your platform. So you want depth on this kind of scale. And so we're going to say the maximum point of depth is going to be that majority opinion. So we're going to say that B is at that point of majority opinion. But you also need space. You have to have distance away from other candidates. Because when candidate A places their position there, since the voters can only pick one candidate, A takes away all of those voters from candidate B. And when candidate C sits their position there, they take away all the voters to the left of candidate B. So candidate B only has this narrow little wedge of voters. Now voters pick up on that, and that's where you get these ideas of, well, I don't want to throw away my vote, so I'm going to choose the lesser of two evils. And what my research has shown is there's actually two optimum positions in a min voting method where you ask which candidate you want to have represent you. And one lies to the left of the majority opinion, and one lies to the right of the majority opinion. And they're far enough distance away that the political platform, we'll say of A, will reach to just about a little bit beyond that majority opinion position, and then about the same direction that way. And C will do the same thing over here. Now, you have these other voting methods that say, well, wait a minute, we can take care of that. You don't have to choose the lesser of two evils. We have ranked choice voting. So, okay, so we do ranked choice voting. And I say, well, I want B as my number one choice, and I want C as my number two choice. Great, okay. Then what ranked choice voting does is if no candidate has over 50% of the vote, it gets rid of the candidate with the fewest number of first place choices. Well, that's going to be the center candidate. These two optimum positions ensure that if you have a candidate on the other side of A will still have a bit more than that other candidate. If they're on the inside of A will have a bit more than that other candidate. And the same with that optimum position over C. And this is where the Republicans and the Democrats traditionally sit. Now, if you had a candidate close to A, it could cause A to lose the election, a spoiled election, like we're used to seeing, but they can't win. And so these candidates in the majority middle, they're the ones that are going to get eliminated in ranked choice voting. Now, Catherine Gell, in her book, The Political Industry, says, hey, the problem is we don't have enough competition. We don't have enough good candidates, and that's what's causing the issue. So let's go ahead and put, a lot of candidates that represent that majority opinion position. They're really there for the voters. And this, from a voter's perspective, is fantastic. First of all, I feel very engaged because I have to learn about all these candidates. So I can go ahead and rate them. I'll make that 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I feel very empowered because I get to go and rate all these different candidates. Oh, that's fantastic. And then the candidates are being so much nicer to each other because they want to be that number 2 vote. They want to be working, with each other. So it's a very much less there's much less animosity in the election. And then we get to the ranked choice voting system and we eliminate the lowest candidate. So we eliminate you, and then we eliminate you, and we eliminate you, and we eliminate you, and we end up electing either A or C again. So that's fantastic that we do all that, but you end up with these same candidates just because when you're doing a min voting method, those are the mathematically stronger positions. The other side of this, and another reason why this causes this division, this split between us, is when one of these candidates wins a majority. When a candidate wins a 55% majority, they've demonstrated 2 things. The first thing is that they can ignore the 45% minority and still be elected. And the second thing is they have to take care of that 55% majority in order to be reelected. Now, this is without anybody being evil or devious or conniving. This is simply this person who got the 55% majority. They said, this is what I want to do. This is what I believe in. 55% of the people said they were right. So why are they going to change that and go in the direction of the 45% who wanted something else? And so this 45%, although they were able to vote, their voice is no longer heard. And we see this over and over in our population. Those weren't the winners in 2017 who were marching on Washington, who were marching throughout the country. And it wasn't the winners in 2021 who were attacking the Capitol building. That's the kind of division. So my premise is that min voting methods, ranked choice voting, final 5 voting, plurality voting, cause our political division and polarization. Now, if we change this and we used instead a max voting method, and a max voting method is any voting method where all voters can rate all candidates and all that information is used to determine the winner, then that changes the strategy of the candidates. Now the candidate who's closest to the majority opinion has the best chance of winning the election. This is assuming everything else the same. All of these individuals are twins. They're all equally known by the voters. They all have the same amount of money, that kind of thing. In the real world, there's going to be all kinds of variables and factors. But as far as the election method goes, what it's going to do is it's going to give a favor to the candidate who's closest to the majority opinion. But the candidates don't know where the majority opinion is any more than I know where it is on this call. So what do they have to do? They have to go and listen to their voters and try to find out where that majority opinion is. And they have to do that continuously, just like Republicans and Democrats today focus on their base. What does their base want? Am I aligned with their base? Because that's how they're going to get reelected. Your candidates are going to have to continuously sample their base, which is now the entire voter population. Because even if this candidate over here is not going to give, this voter over here is not going to give a high rating to candidate A, candidate A still has to know about that candidate so they can get that majority opinion lined up properly, so they can find it. So the first advantage of going to a max voting election is that the candidates are very engaged in seeking out the opinion of the voters, and the opinion of the voters is what's driving the winning political platform. The second advantage is that there's only one majority opinion on any issue with any given voters at any given time. And so all of the candidates get the same advantage by moving to it. Since it's not one person, one vote, all these candidates are now looking to support the same political platform. So what's the difference between a Republican and a Democrat if they're supporting the same political platform? The idea of political party starts to become unimportant, starts to disappear. There's no majority to support anymore. There's no majority that could lead to gerrymandering or a group who could do the gridlock. There's now more political room for these candidates to start working together to actually start solving our problems. The third advantage is the fact that the majority opinion doesn't jump around every 2 years. The way when we have a liberal government comes into power, we go off in the liberal direction. When the conservatives come in, we go off in the conservative direction. Now we could shift a whole bunch of these people on the far left could die off and have a bunch of people show up on the right. That doesn't shift us that much. It moves it, but not dramatically. So now we can do consistent policies, election after election after election. We could start planning 10, 20, 30 years into the future. The fourth advantage is that we become more resilient against our adversaries, because they can still put up their troll sites and they can still, antagonize these individuals. So they start yelling and screaming at each other and wanting to attack each other, but that's not really pulling the nation one way or the other, because in a majority rule situation, you just need to convince that 1 to 5% of the people to slide over. If you do that, your government heads off in a different direction. And so that's where you get the big fights over doing that. But in this case, the two sides are like pulling on each other. Well, the majority opinion is really not moving. So the government's not really changing. So it takes a lot of that sting out of it. The fifth benefit of using a max voting system is everybody is free and able to support the political opinion they have right now. We're not building consensus. We're not finding better ways to talk to each other. We're not doing any of those things because everybody comes to an election from a different journey, has a different viewpoint, and we need to understand all of it so that we can identify what that real majority opinion is. If this idea that min voting methods divide us, max voting methods unite us is right, by implementing max voting methods nationwide, we could be issuing in the real first golden age of democracy. I don't think America has ever been as good as it could be. And we've never gone as far as we could be. And this is where you guys come in. Is this right? Did I miss something? Does this make sense? I don't know of anybody else who's looking at elections this way, who's looking at elections from the standpoint of what do the candidates have to do? What is their winning strategy? I don't know of anyone who's looking at elections from a standpoint of dividing a population. Why does it divide the population? And I do happen to know that you guys have like a best paper competition coming up June 1st. It says this is an open area. And maybe if you know something that I don't, that other people have done, this kind of research. I've gone through, Warren Smith's pages and the rangevoting.org. in the star voting team and CES team and the fair vote team. And usually when people start talking voting, they get into the cephalogical arguments about, well, what's the right fairness criterion? What about Arrow's impossibility theorem? And what about mononicity and how this violates this? And it's all arguing over the trees and not the forest, which is min voting divides us, max voting unites us. So that is my challenge to you. And we don't have forever to do this. We've already had one civil war. We don't know when that next one is coming, but it seems a little closer and closer. But we have to deal with COVID, and we have to deal with climate change and the economy and healthcare. And we have all of these issues where we will need to work together in ways we never have before. And to get what you've never had, you have to do what you've never done, which I would argue is adopt max voting methods nationwide. And that's why we put forward the division-free voting initiative in Nevada that is currently out for signatures. There you go. That is my mystery and my research, and I would love it if smarter people than me could take a look at this.